Hi, welcome to my review for one of the best games I have ever played, and that is Bioshock Infinite, developed by Irrational Games. Set in 1912, Bioshock Infinite takes the player into the life of Booker DeWitt, a former Pinkerton who is sent to a floating utopia in the sky called Columbia to find a young woman, Elizabeth, and bring her back to New York City to repay an anonymous debt.
Excuse me, where am I?
Heaven. Or as close as we'll see till Judgment Day.
One of the many great elements that sets Bioshock Infinite apart from not only FPSs, but from other games in general, is its rich story, themes of race as well as other social issues, and its wondrous characters. Not to oversell it, but I've played my fair share of great games in my time. However, I don't think a video game's characters and story have ever had this much of an effect on me. I found myself to be incredibly invested in the two characters, Booker and Elizabeth, and their journey in the bright and vibrant yet bleak world of the floating city of Columbia. This may sound a bit hyperbolic, but Bioshock Infinite has some of the best storytelling I have ever seen in a video game. It kind of feels like a classic Disney tale but with a Nolan or Hitchcockian twist. I'm not going to go into any specifics because honestly, the less you know about the story, the better. And believe me, this is a story that mustn't be spoiled. But all I will say is that you're sent on a mission to bring back a girl unharmed, and that's exactly what you want to do. Unlike most games that require you to escort an NPC, I actually found myself wanting to protect Elizabeth and making sure she gets out of Columbia safely. And speaking of Elizabeth, she's one of the best written video game characters I have ever encountered, and because of this, she gave off a sense of realism. Overall, by the time Bioshock Infinite's story had concluded, I found myself wanting more, but in an incredibly positive way. I don't usually go out my way to purchase DLCs, but for Bioshock Infinite, I will, without any hesitation, scrape up the change to afford it. The gameplay is very similar to the previous Bioshocks, although the combat does feel a bit tighter and a lot more forgiving. If you're someone who wasn't a fan of the gameplay in the previous installments, you may have the same problems here. As far as weapons go, there are a variety of them that you will stumble across. However, my weapon of choice was the machine gun you get early on in the game. Now, there are other great weapons like the shotgun or volley gun, but my absolute favorite method of attack was using these special potions called Vigors. Much like the plasmids in the first two Bioshocks, they range from absorption powers such as Return to Cinder to levitation powers called Bucking Bronco. Depending on your playing style, one Vigor might suit you better than another, but I personally had better luck with the fire bombs of Devil's Kiss. It was that particular Vigor I found to be the most effective for mowing down the variety of foes I encountered throughout the course of the game. Now, as far as enemies are concerned, there are of course the typical cops and soldiers, but there are some incredibly unique ones too. For instance, instead of the big daddies in the previous installments, Bioshock Infinite has its own form of super soldier. These are called handymen, and the fights with these cyborgs are made up of pure epicness. And depending on the difficulty, they can be a tough kill, which is a good thing considering that I always felt a sense of accomplishment after defeating one. However, with everything that's been said, Bioshock Infinite does have some gameplay elements that greatly differentiate from the first two Bioshocks. Unlike the closed-in, isolated world of Rapture, Bioshock Infinite takes the player to a more open world that encourages a small amount of exploration. It's nothing like Skyrim or even Batman Arkham Asylum for that matter, but there are a handful of segments that just lets the player take in the scenery and get lost in Columbia's beauty. These segments in particular were among some of my favorites in the game. Unfortunately though, there have been and will be some players who will undoubtedly rush through these segments just to get back into the combat. Now, if I were to give any advice, I would suggest don't do that. Take your time, explore the area, look for the character recordings, and again, just take some time to appreciate Bioshock's well-crafted visuals. What's also in addition is that the gameplay is a bit more dynamic. Thanks to this easy to use and highly stylized game mechanic called Skyhook, it really shakes up the gameplay and makes an already fresh and exciting game even more so. And not to mention, it just looks too damn cool. However, what's probably the hugest difference here is the addition of a young female follower named Elizabeth. She's with you for about 75% of the game, and what's great about her character is that she can do a variety of things. Aside from having a superpower, which I will get to in a minute, Elizabeth fends for herself while proving to be a great assistance to the player. In other words, she will replenish health, ammo, salts, that's the substance that the Vigors run off of, money, and most importantly, she will revive you when you die. Now, outside of losing a small amount of money and the remaining enemies regaining little bits of health, there's really no penalty for dying in Bioshock Infinite. You can of course bump up the difficulty at any given moment, but I will add that Bioshock Infinite isn't the type of game that's really meant to be challenging for the player. It's really meant to be an experience rather than, to simply put it, a game. And lastly, as for Elizabeth's powers that I mentioned earlier, Elizabeth can create these little portals called tears. I'm not going to tell you what exactly these things are because that would be spoiling some of the story, but all you need to know is that these tears will bring items and other important aids to you while you're in battle. They can be very resourceful.
Hallelujah.
There's no reason for being coy, so I'm just going to come out and say it. Bioshock Infinite looks outstanding. Being at the end of this generation, it's extraordinary to see a game still pushing the Xbox 360's hardware to its limits. When I first stepped out of the shrine and saw all the buildings floating and moving around all at once, I couldn't help but feel slightly awestruck. And I also love the overall art design for the game, whether that be the look of the environment or the well-animated characters that appear on screen. Everything has a somewhat classic Disney look, but of course in a darker and much more mature way. And also to give it to the team who put so much work on the facial expressions that can be seen on the NPC Elizabeth. Whatever the situation or environment is, Elizabeth can be seen having a reaction to it. I would even describe it as slightly innovative considering how many followers of games tend to just stand around with deadpan facial expressions, while of course getting in the way. However, considering that this is such a subtle yet important detail, perhaps not all players will pay attention to this. But it's the little things such as this that can really flesh out not only a game, but of course any form of art.
God only knows what I'd be without you. Without you. Without you.
Just like the first Bioshock, the score for Bioshock Infinite is remarkable thanks to Gary Skimmon. Looking at the already gorgeous visuals and looking at the skyline or walking through a shrine while hearing this breathtaking music echoing through the halls is really unlike anything I have ever heard or experienced in a game before. But I also have to give praise to the barbershop quartet that can be seen and heard early in the game singing a Beach Boys song. It's quite beautiful. There are other small moments like this, so do keep your ears peeled when playing the game. And last but not least, I have to give praise to all the voice actors who lent their voices in Bioshock Infinite. Troy Baker, Courtney Draper, Kit Vanden Heuvel, Oliver Vecchio, and everyone else all give top-notch vocal performances.
Heads.
Or tails.
Come on, let me through. Heads.
Or tails.
Overall, Bioshock Infinite is a step forward in not only the Bioshock series, but in all of gaming. It's an already outstanding game, but what makes Bioshock Infinite an experience like no other is its story and writing. I completed the game within the week of its release, and I'm still thinking about it. In recent years, there's been a huge debate on whether or not video games should be considered as an art form. So if you're someone who's unsure, I implore you to play this game and not see at least some sort of artistry there. In my own humble opinion, Bioshock Infinite is the very definition of art, and I give it the highest score I can give. I give Bioshock Infinite a 5 out of 5. It's a definite masterpiece. Go play this. Well everyone, that is my review for this incredible game. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I'm Colyn Kirkland, and thanks for watching.